Firstly, Taser shock. New South Wales Police will continue to use the Taser stun gun on the streets of this state. This in spite of a coronial inquest into the Taser-related death of Brazilian man Roberto Laudisio Curti, and this week the Ombudsman's critical review of more than 2,000 Taser incidents. Sean Rubenstein Dunlop reports, and a warning, this story contains confronting images.
Put the knife down and get on. Put the knife down. Get on the ground.
It was a situation that didn't require a violent response.
I'm asking you to get on the ground or you'll be tasered. Now get on the ground.
Philip Bugmy was armed when police confronted him at Wilcannia in the state's far west last year, but he gave up his knife.
Down on the ground.
He was not putting anyone at any harm. He didn't present a risk to himself at that stage or to police.
This Taser cam video shows the Aboriginal man refusing police orders to lie down. Police told a court this was an act of aggressive bravado. The standoff in his grandmother's house lasts for more than a minute until...
Taser, taser, taser! Taser, taser, taser! If you don't comply, you'll be tasered again.
2 darts pierce his chest and deliver a shock of up to 50,000 volts.
It is a massive amount of pain. You're immobilised for a period of 5 seconds. It's like a very hard hammer hitting your body all over, and in very rapid succession. It's quite painful, you can't move, and you don't want to be tasered again.
An internal police review found the tasering was justified, but a magistrate ruled police used excessive force.
It was an unlawful use of force, and it could be easily said that it was a brutal use of force.
The Ombudsman has found events like this are happening far too frequently in New South Wales, like in 2010, when Sydney man Ali Alkan was stunned in the back by police. He's suing police for compensation. Bruce Barber has found in a 6-month period 27 people tasered and they shouldn't have.
That's 1 a week. In that same period, we had 2 people a week who were having tasers pointed at them when there was no reason for them to be threatened with that weapon.
It actually highlights that police officers have a really difficult job. We turn up to a very violent, stressful situation and we have to make split-second decisions. Now, in hindsight, those decisions can be picked apart.
After being isolated in police custody, this man was tasered while trying to hang himself. The Ombudsman found the deployment put him at greater risk of harm than his actual suicide attempt.
It's still connected.
The video is part of a series the Ombudsman has released showing taser misuse. Bruce Barber had to refer the case back to senior police before they agreed it was in breach of the guidelines. But police insist the public isn't seeing the full picture. They say tasers are generally safe.
You're getting a brief glimpse. There's not the lead on. Again, the taser camera turned on. The incident may have gone for half an hour, or it may have been ongoing issues for years.
Nearly 75% of times, in fact, that the taser is deployed. It is not fired.
The Ombudsman did support the use of tasers in the majority of cases, like this example where a serious assault was taking place. But the report also calls for stricter requirements in the use of tasers.
It does highlight areas where we can improve our performance.
Key among 46 recommendations, tasers are not to be used in scenarios like this one, where the target is fleeing or handcuffed and passive on threatening situations. The Ombudsman says police should face disciplinary action for misuse. People shouldn't be tasered for more than 15 seconds in total, and police must ban drive stunning, where the taser is held against the skin. The same problems have been raised in the inquest into the death this year of Brazilian student Roberto Laudisio Curti. He was fleeing when first tasered by police, then handcuffed and tasered again, before being drive-stunned 7 times. He was tasered for about a minute in total. The case has attracted much publicity, but opponents of tasers say there are other issues which need to be addressed.
Aboriginal people make up only 2% of this state, and yet we're 1/3 of the taser incidents. Now, there is something wrong there. We say it's racism from the police towards Aboriginal people.
Ray Jackson argues the Ombudsman's recommendations are too weak and out of step with his community's expectations.
There only changes words in a book that most police don't seem to look at, or if they do look at it, they don't seem to remember what's in it.
Alarmingly, the Ombudsman also found most misuse is going undetected.
Case after case, it's raised to the internal review within the police, and they've ticked off on it and exonerated all the police involved.
The Taser review panels of senior officers routinely discount much of the evidence from those cameras and prefer the written versions of the officers instead.
We will always find instances where there may have been a misuse. If it's a training issue, we correct it. If it's an abuse issue, we deal with it. We've never shied away from that, and we won't in the future.
But the Greens are not convinced and are calling for ongoing independent scrutiny.
We need some external oversight, but the Ombudsman's recommendation doesn't go there. The Ombudsman just recommends tinkering with the current broken system.
Settle down or I'll tase you.
And if that system isn't fixed, lawyers are warning the police force faces a costly compensation bill. Philip Bugme is determined the police will pay for his ordeal.
Taser!
He's not someone who's only been affected on that one occasion by that one stun from the taser. He's someone who's still to this day affected by what happened.
Sean Rubenstein Dunlop reporting. With me now is the New South Wales Ombudsman, Bruce Barber. Welcome. The Minister for Police, Mike Gallagher, has told me he would suspend the operational use of tasers immediately if you, as Ombudsman, recommended it. Why are you defending the taser?
I'm not defending the taser. What I'm doing is presenting the facts about taser use. And the facts about taser use from our extensive investigation is that in most cases, tasers are used responsibly by police and consistent with operating procedures. And importantly, when the taser is used appropriately and effectively, it's a very good tactical option that saves the community members from injury and also police.
This is an issue about public confidence of policing. I know there are very good uses, and it can be very effective in de-escalating violent situations. That's clear from your report, but it will be judged on the worst cases, won't it, Mr. Barber? Absolutely. And the worst cases are undermining public confidence in this device.
And that's why I've made 44 recommendations to ensure that we actually fix up those problems. I don't think the answer is to do away with tasers altogether. I think the risks now of doing that would in fact be far greater. What we've got to focus on is making sure that they are used appropriately and that we don't have misuses.
When you first looked at this in 2008, you recommended a moratorium for 2 years. That was overruled by the government and the police department. They rolled it out. Now you have found breaches, consistent breaches, of the standard operating procedures. You've listed them all there. Why do you give the police department and Taser International, the manufacturer, the benefit of the doubt, which is clearly in your mind?
There's no benefit of the doubt. It's about being responsible. And
why don't you pull them? Why don't you pull them into line and say, I'm going to recommend suspension until your officers are retrained, because we cannot afford to get this wrong?
I don't think that suspension's the answer. I don't think suspension of any tactical option because of misuses is the answer, unless those misuses are so prevalent to suggest that there is no proper use.
Let's say there's a taser-related death tomorrow.
That's potentially there, and of course there's a very high-profile case that the coroner is currently looking at. In terms of putting things into context, I think we need to recognise police do deal with very significant and very troubling situations. In a 2-year period in our report, there were over 25,000 uses of force. only 1.7% of those uses of force were the discharge of a taser. So they are not used in very many cases. 73% of taser use is only draw and cover. What we have to focus on is making sure that we don't take away from police a tactical option that is an important and useful one, but we recognise that they must be used more effectively.
I appreciate you trying to get it into perspective for us, and you're not commenting on the Roberto Curti case for the coroner. Wouldn't any case involving tasering a target fleeing in a state of excited delirium, tasering that target multiple times, including while handcuffed, tasering in drive-stun mode, wouldn't such a case ring alarm bells with you?
We've made recommendations on all of those issues. We've made recommendations to restrict and not to use tasers on fleeing persons, not to use tasers when they are handcuffed, and not to use tasers in drive-stun mode unless there are absolutely exceptional circumstances in play.
What say the coroner in the Curti case says, I recommend the suspension of their use until police officers can be retrained. The Brazilian people are watching everything we do in this. It's an international case now, and surely the message should be that we're not going to tolerate the ill-disciplined and unprofessional police using this device inappropriately.
The coroner's findings will obviously be considered by me when they're handed down. She's also aware that we're oversighting the critical incident investigation in relation to the Curti matter. So we'll carefully consider those findings of the coroner.
There's another issue apart from public safety, and that's public liability, because the taxpayers could well be paying substantial compensation to the Curti family and other taser victims who've survived but have been targeted inappropriately. Shouldn't you suspend their use on an issue of public liability? The Treasurer would thank you for it.
No, I don't think, once again, that is an appropriate reason to suspend their use. I think the potential is, if you mirror this argument in reverse, the moment there is an individual who is killed unnecessarily because police officers don't have tasers, or a police officer is significantly injured because he had a taser taken away from him, we'd be having the debate in exactly the reverse. We've got to be balanced and we've got to be responsible in terms of this discussion. And as long as these weapons, they are weapons, are used responsibly and appropriately, if the police take on board the 44 recommendations I've made, I will be much more confident in their use, and I hope that will translate in greater public confidence.
You say it should not be used for compliance, yet repeatedly it is draw and cover, as you say, and the threat to taser the target seems almost inevitable to come after draw and cover. That's what you call mission creep, isn't it? They are using it for compliance, and you'd want to use it for compliance.
We didn't find any evidence in the 576 issues that we looked at, incidents that we looked at, we didn't find any evidence of systemic mission creep, and that was one of the concerns I had back in 2008, as you know. So I was very pleased to see that there wasn't evidence of that. What we did identify was some individual cases where the use for compliance was inappropriate. But most of the draw and cover situations where a police officer takes the taser out, arms it and points it at someone, they are actually used to resolve potentially violent situations in a way that actually leads to no violence.
Ombudsman, thanks very much.
My pleasure.